Welcome back to the podcast. I am so super excited about today because I know y'all have been waiting and waiting and waiting for this episode. John and I went on our annual couples goal setting getaway, and you guys were eating up the content, wanting to know what it is that we do. And we made some posts on Instagram with the steps, but we realized we needed something very comprehensive for you. So I have your very favorite podcast guest and my favorite human on the whole entire planet back today, my husband John.
I'm here. We're back. Welcome to our new space. I'm excited. Let's do this.
And we're going to go over what we do every year to set our goals together as a couple, and also give you just like the step-by-step so that you can take this and replicate this with your partner or whoever your accountability buddy is for your goals in your life.
Yep.
So
let's
get super started. So this year we went to, and one of the things that we like to do every time we, and it didn't start this way. I think the very first time we ever went away and made it a getaway, we went to the beach out in Oregon.
Yes.
We went to the coast.
Yep.
And every year we've kind of started to make it feel bigger and more extravagant's the wrong word, but more like next level, next life kind of feeling. And I think I was thinking this was the furthest we traveled, but you corrected me on that.
Yeah. Well, we went to Toronto, and Toronto to Portland is maybe similar.
Yeah.
Similar,
Where this
different
similar
coast.
to New York to London, where before I was thinking Portland to London is way far, but we're not in Portland anymore.
No, we're not.
Because of our goal setting from 2024.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
I can't believe that. So the very first step that we did after we got to London, and when we planned this trip, I think one of the things that's really important to say is and John was very good about this, and I'm just going to say this, and for all the women out there or people who feel like your partner isn't fully bought in on goal setting, I got a lot of that. Like, I wish my partner would set goals with me. It's so amazing that you and John do that together. When we very first started this, John wasn't as bought in as he is now. Like, I think this was the first year that you were almost advocating and taking more control than almost I was.
Yeah.
And when we were planning this trip, he kept reminding me, this is a goal setting trip. We are going there to envision our next level and to plan our goals. And so no matter what, like whatever else we see or do is just a bonus, but we're really there focused on making sure our goals become a reality and that we're set up for 2025. So when we planned our trip, that's what we did. We didn't, I want to do some other things, go see Windsor Castle and do these things. But it was like, you know what? We need to make sure that we are going to be setting our goals. And we really set aside the first 3 days for sure to do our goal planning. So I think that it wasn't like just a vacation.
It wasn't a vacay at all.
We were working. We were tired.
It was a work trip.
Because we're like using our brains. Somebody was like, "Are you writing this off?" And I was like,
Yeah, it definitely was a work trip.
Should have done that.
I know.
And so we went to London this year, and when we get started, John had a really good point where I'm really good at let's go. I want to take action. I want to set goals. I'm like future, plan. And John was like, you know what? I think we need to start by doing what he calls hindsighting and looking back at 2024. So that was our very first step, is just look back and say, what felt good, what didn't feel good, what really worked for us, what didn't work for us. And we ended up talking for a really long time about that. And I thought ended up being a really powerful part of our goal setting getaway.
You know what I realized was we were starting to look at this goal setting as like if you work in any form of business, we were just treating our life like we're running a business, which we technically are, but it's like, what do you do when you are mapping out your 3-year roadmap for your business or your product journey, right? Like, you hindsight and you look at what worked, what didn't. You understand the market, you understand consumer, and then you make a plan to get after what the next few years is going to look like. And we just took that same exact approach with our life and every aspect of it. So that's why that felt, I think, like such a big day, was because there's a ton to hindsight about.
Yeah. And we want to share the steps with y'all, but we also want to share what we learned about ourselves too. So when we did our hindsighting, what were some of the things? I know I have notes and notes. I'm a very old school paper pen on person. But what were some of, do you think, the biggest takeaways that we had when we reflected back on 2024?
I think the number one takeaway was the growth mindset. I have that like my top note. But I think for me specifically, my mindset growth just felt really tremendous this year, this past year. And I think that's largely in part to you and Lindsay as well, doing a lot of like actually
Shout
doing
out,
coaching and
Lindsay.
actually doing things that I just hadn't ever done before to that level. Like we talk every day. It's different when you live with a life coach. Like you're literally talking about life coaching related those type of conversations every
Digging
day.
into your brain
Every
every
day, yeah.
morning over
So I'm just
coffee.
like
I'm always
I,
like, "Are you awake? Are you ready? Can I ask you a question?" He's like, "Give me 10 minutes."
yeah, but I do think that has like really propelled me and my growth mindset because now I'm constantly, if you've heard that phrase, uh, growth mindset is how I approach everything now, and I
Shout
think
out
that's
Carol Dweck.
what's really helped have some of the transformations I've had this year. So growth mindset, and I also put growth mindset together. I think was the really key, the key unlock, because there were times where you were ready for the
Yeah.
growth, you were ready for the change, and there were times where I fully just was not.
Yeah.
You know, but over the course of 24, we found a way to grow together in ways we have never done before.
Yeah, never done. And I think that just also makes me think about we've been together for 10 years. And our relationship has
Yeah.
gone, like, when you think directionally of us individually as people, like in the very beginning, like going very much together. And then, when I got back into running, that was something that kind of pulled us this way. And you started focusing on music more. And so there was a lot of like bobbling like this. And I feel like this year we got on like the same
Yeah.
path, like
Yeah.
very focused together. And I think that created that growth together a lot because we had something that we were both focusing on, which was largely moving to New York. But I also think there were things where when you talk about growth mindset, there were a lot of ways where I released some stubborn things in our relationship too, in like communication and wants and desires. And I feel like one of the things that really benefited us this last year was that in order to have that growth mindset for both of us and to grow together, we had to create so much honesty about what we truly want, what we're truly feeling, versus maybe saying what we think the other person wants us to hear, or, vice versa, back and forth. And I think our communication is just so much more clear now.
Yes.
Like it's
Yeah.
kind of like we're not fucking around. I'm just telling you exactly how it is. But we had to feel like really safe to be that blunt.
Yeah.
I think to each other.
I would say the safe part is 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And I think that was some of the hard parts for me personally, not feeling safe, but not wanting to hurt feelings or like always wanting you to have everything you wanted. So it made me afraid to be like, but I don't want to do that with you, or I would rather do this, or everybody watching.
Yeah, we have a
guest.
visitor.
Ellie has entered the chat. So I think that was a really big piece. And one of the other things too that I thought was really awesome that I reflected on that for me is a really powerful takeaway that I don't want to forget and I want to keep remembering how good it was in our life was the idea that yes, we decided to move to New York and we really accomplished that so quickly, right? Like really when we got down to it, it was like 6 months and less than 6 months and we were here, right? I think
Right.
that for me, though, I am very much, like I said at the beginning of this, I like to plan. Let's talk about future, go, go, go. And I like to have steps. And we're both this way, but in very different ways. But when we decided to move to New York, we let go of the how.
Yes.
And we just looked at possibility and we really just looked at the end goal. And we just every day took an action that moved us further, and it didn't matter if the action was like quote unquote wrong or a failure. Like when we talk about putting our house up for sale, we tried a bunch of different stuff and none of it worked except for the thing in the end that finally worked, right?
Right.
And we didn't view anything as failure, and we were just like, you know what, the how doesn't matter, we are just getting there. And we trusted that, and that's something that I feel like becoming an entrepreneur has been a skill or a talent or a perspective that I've lost a little bit because being an entrepreneur is new and not new, but at the time was new and difficult in my brain.
Yeah.
And so that was a really big takeaway for me that I felt was important to remember and I want to remember forever. And so I'll always be like, but remember New York. Remember moving to New York.
Yeah. Letting go of the how is hard for you. It really
so hard.
was. But now that we are kind of operating and even going into this goal setting, operating in life with like kind of letting go of the how, it's really powerful. Like how quickly things can take shape
Yes.
when you allow the universe to have them take form the way they need to.
Yeah. And
know
you're
what
not
I mean?
like cock blocking the universe by being like, it needs to be this way. And the universe is like, well, I have two other ways I really want to do it. But
Yep.
okay, fine. You just keep doing it your way.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that helped with that you were talking about before was how much desire we had and how following our desire was so beneficial in this process and how much we both wanted it. And so then it made it way easier to be like the how doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know? So
Totally.
I think that was really, really cool too.
Totally. What else? One of the things I think that stood out in the hindsighting was the authenticity bit. That was,
Oh yeah.
I think that was powerful for both of us. We just really, to be honest, found a way to be more authentically ourselves, but also just be honest with ourselves in terms of what it is we want to not just reach from like a goal setting standpoint, but also just in existence of like allowing ourselves to truly be who it is we want to be.
Yeah.
And I see that in how you've been showing up in our relationship. I see how you've been showing up in your business. Shoot, you changed the whole fucking business changed because you finally allowed yourself to be authentically yourself.
Yeah, and I think what's so funny about that too is it's not like Be Authentic was in our 2024
No,
goals,
not at all.
but it was just something that happened. And as we decided that John wanted to create more authenticity in his life in having being an artist be a large majority of your life versus a small piece of it, that influenced me to be like, oh my God, yeah, I need to be looking at what I authentically actually want to do. And running a health coaching company was not it turned out. But like
Yeah.
you said, I was not willing to be honest to myself about that for a really long time.
Yeah.
And so I think that goes with practicing that honesty with you. In order to practice it with you in our relationship, I had to be honest with myself, and then I have to be honest with the world. And honesty is hard, but it matters so much. And now I think we're both really, really happy with the type of work we're doing and how
Yep.
we are in the world.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, that was a big unlock too, because I think how I show up as a brand and as an artist, there were definitely some things that I think I was kind of stifling on my own, not really knowingly, or not recognizing it until you kind of called me out. And, you know, especially when it comes to just like rap, the genre of hip hop, and like the personalities that I think predominantly are in the space. It's like that's not me, and really allowing every aspect of myself to show up in that space. But also, even as I was like leaving the company when I was working at Nike, I think there was like a transition that I went through where I was maybe coming into it with like this aspiration of wanting to do certain things and climb the ladder and all of that. And then over the course of the 10 years, I found myself like really finding myself at the end of that, where I was able to show up 100% myself,
Yeah.
and not dim my light for anybody. That felt really powerful. And I think as I left, it is really the reason why I was able to launch and jump into what it is we're doing now. But also, I think a lot of people saw it and felt it and was just like, holy shit, like
Yeah, that's really actually interesting to think about, to watch that, because it's like there was you in the corporate world and you brought more of your artistry into that. You brought more of who you were as a creative into that.
Yeah.
But then you also had you as an artist and you brought more of what I am labeling your like charisma into that versus, and
Yeah.
so there was kind of like this addition here, and then both of,
Yeah.
the charisma was already here, but it wasn't here. So there was just like this blending of it all so that all of you encompassed everything no matter where you were.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just across the board, I think authenticity was a big thing
For
that,
both of us.
yeah, that we just really, I think we blossomed into. That's going to really help in this upcoming year.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So that was the first step, was like looking back and saying just how was the year? And I think one of the things that's really important is there, of course, were things in the year that didn't go so well. I think for us, we had a really epic 2024. So our things that didn't go so well was small.
Yeah.
But that might not always be the case. But one of the things that I think is really important when you are doing this part is this is the very beginning of your goal setting. It's literally step 1 out of 6. And you want to end that on a high note to create positive momentum moving into the next year and moving into your goal planning for the next year. So when you go and you do this step of reflecting back, be aware of your areas of need or your areas of opportunity, but celebrate the fuck out of the things that did work.
Yeah.
I think that that's really important. So there were definitely things about moving to New York that were shaky. Both of us had like different ideas. We didn't realize, I mean, it made sense. Like in retrospect, obviously John would like need a break from being in the corporate world for 10 years and maybe want like a vacation from that or something, right?
Yeah.
But there were certain things that we didn't anticipate that both of us kind of had a struggle with. But we are aware of those and we are learning from those, but we are not focused on those. We are focusing on the celebrations, the things we accomplished, the way we grew, so that when we start thinking about this next year and doing this next step, our mind feels expansive and proud, right?
100%. Yeah. And we did, just to be honest, like we did talk about the wins and then we talked about the opportunities. So I think what you're alluding to in terms of some of the few things that didn't maybe go as planned, we could maybe look at as opportunities. And those, a lot of times the opportunities are what kind of unlocks what your goals will be in the long term. But the whole point of this hindsight was to really take away what worked. Like, of course, we're going to identify what didn't work, but what worked is so important because we have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
That
Double down on what works.
Exactly. Yeah.
Keep doing it.
Yep.
So that was step 1. Step 2 is a newer step to our goal setting, because we've been doing this for years, but we only first did this step last year. And I think it totally changed the game, because it's what made our goal setting so much deeper, where before, like we were kind of talking about this, we used to set goals like, how many marathons is Kayla going to run? How many songs is John going to put out? And those are great goals, but they're not deep. They're not life-changing. They're not super growth-oriented. Like maybe if I'd never run a marathon before, but it was like basically we were numerically doing more of the same.
Yeah.
And what we did is last year we started our goal-setting getaway in Toronto with a visualization. And again, shout out Lindsay. One of the things that she has in her coaching program is this highest self meditation. It's 30 minutes long, and you don't have to have it to do this, but I mean, if you want to get it, of course. But we each put one AirPod in each of our ears. We listen to it at the same time, and we just like journal about every step of what a day in the life of our dream life would be like.
Yeah.
And when I say every detail, it's like when you open your eyes, what's the first thing you see? What's the first thing you feel? Who's in bed next to you? Obviously, John is in bed with me. And then it's like, where do you go? What does your room look like? How do you feel? What are you excited for? And you're writing down all of these details. And I think the thing that's so powerful about that is when I ask you questions like, what are you excited for? And what do you see? That's how John and I even realized we saw a city outside of us, like a city view. And that's how we were like, we are not. And when we were describing what we did in the day, it was not in Portland.
Yeah.
It was in a major metropolitan city. And we're like, oh, well, that's what we want to focus on building in 2024 when we saw that visualization. And then of course you were not going into a corporate job. So that was our other big
Yeah.
change for that.
Huge, yeah.
And so we did that again. And I think one of the most special things to me is when you do it, you're writing, you're ferociously writing, your hand is getting like a cramp, you're trying to shake it out to keep up with the meditation. And then when it's over, we read it to each other. And that's my favorite part. And it gives me goosebumpies every
Yeah.
time. And it just feels like magic to hear your dream life. And it feels a little bit like magic also because in listening to you, I envision being part of it since we're together. And I don't know about you, but to me, that just feels so good. And it feels like the epitome of like togetherness. I don't know.
Yeah. I like this part a lot because not only are we kind of getting super descriptive about like our dream life, but I think what's really beautiful is because of the growth together, because of like the way I think our life has really blossomed together over the last, I would honestly say just over the last year, right? It's so beautiful how many parallels we ended up having
Yeah.
last year. And then of course this year.
Yeah.
And I think maybe 5 years ago, these wouldn't have been so aligned, which isn't a bad thing, right? It's okay if you and your partner you maybe envision things differently, because at the end of the day, the goal is to figure out, okay, how do we unlock each other's dream scenarios
Yeah.
and how do we pull them together? But I think what was so cool about this was they naturally pulled together on their own, and it was super powerful because it made it feel more real.
Yeah. And I'm curious about something that you said. Maybe if 5 years ago we did this, would they have been so similar? And I think one of the things, because we did it the first time last year in Toronto, and one of the things I almost had like an internal fear. I was like, okay, here goes John's thing. It's going to be so different than what I want. And I'm pretty sure I cried listening to yours because I was like, oh my God.
Because it was poetry. It was so good.
But I remember being like, oh my God, we're so on the same page. And this whole time I thought maybe we weren't.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if 5 years ago, if we would have done it, if we would have maybe had that feeling sooner, like, wait, we're on the same page. We're not,
Yeah, maybe.
yeah, like,
maybe.
I'm really curious about that.
Maybe.
Because
But
it really did help me change my mind about the way that I acted or saw or responded to different choices that we made throughout the year, which could be a whole, I know you guys go back and listen to our communication episode, but
yeah.
so yeah, I'm really interested. Now I wish we would have done it 5 years ago, see if it would
You
be the
know
same or
what?
different.
But here's the thing about 5 years ago that I think makes everything real today. And that's, I wouldn't have been ready to, I think, be this honest.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
I think that there was like I said, so much growth. I mean, that was the number one hindsighting thing was like our growth. But I don't think I would have been able to visualize
yeah, that makes
to
sense.
this level.
I think that's true.
And the visualization, I think, would have been a little jaded, with maybe not really,
Not the honesty.
yeah, and not thinking outside the box, not thinking infinite possibility, but really thinking within the box that society has created for.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't, and I tell this to people all the time, like I couldn't move here to New York 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, because had I done it, it would look a lot different.
Yeah.
Right. So I think with that said, the visualization, I think would have been different, because you were already stepping into this new version of you. I've been watching it, and I think the entrepreneurial journey has really helped do that. As I know it's exciting. It's like if you run a business, you're like, oh, it feels like every day I'm trying to learn something new, and I'm changing, and I'm growing. I'm
feel like
tired of growing. I
it's
just
like
want to
I'm
be here.
finally fucking past the
I know.
growth freaking
I know.
uphill march, up mountain march.
But I do
Yeah.
think that because of that, I think you had a kind of a head start on,
Yeah.
thinking larger than life. People think that me working with LeBron or working with Drake is a larger than life. It's not a larger than life thing. It's a like it's within the confines of what it is obviously amazing, and it was my dream, but I couldn't see 3 years ago. I couldn't see bigger than that.
Yeah, well, I also think I don't think there's any fault in that. I think that's the way that life goes. Like I even thinking about everything, you create like a tolerance or a new ceiling or a new floor. So when you do anything in life, you see a ceiling that's so high. When you were younger and you wanted to work at Nike, just being at Nike and basketball was crazy. And then you're like, oh my God, but I could work with LeBron. Once you get there, that becomes your floor. And a
Exactly.
new ceiling appears. And so it was larger than life. Now larger than life is just different.
And that's just my point is
Yeah.
that 5 years ago, had we done this, I wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been. You were already thinking past that
I
ceiling.
see.
And I wasn't yet.
Well, 5 years. Oh yeah, 5 years ago I was done teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I think
Or going on 6.
the idea of possibilities, I'm only just getting caught up with you, I
Yeah.
think, which is so like
So exciting.
it is exciting. And it's like, God, I wish I could have gotten here sooner, but that's just it. It's like everything happens for a reason, and all of the things that we've done over the past few years created this opportunity for the visualization to line up like this now.
And I think that that's also a testament for people listening or watching that you get better at this every year. Like I think a lot of people move into the self-development space, and I feel like you do it with a lot of grace, but that people are like, "Oh, why am I not changing or growing, or my life's not accelerating fast enough or not?" Like we've been goal setting together for like 7 years, 8 years or something. Like I don't think we've been doing it the entire time we've been together, but we've definitely been doing it since we've been married.
We've been doing it we've been doing it for a long time.
And so I think it's okay that whatever timeline of growth is your timeline of growth. But
Yeah.
so starting the process now, and in 5 years, you're going to be a freaking expert.
Exactly.
Or maybe sooner. We'll see. Okay, so step 1 was reflect on what works. Step 2 was the visualization. Step 3 was also something new that we did this year. And what we did is actually, before I want to get into that, one of the things that I really love that we did after the visualization, because I was about to say, we started step 3 the very next day. It was the first thing we did the next morning. And the reason being is in the first day, we did our what worked, got amped up about our growth, then did the visualization. And then I loved what you said after the visualization, where you're like, I don't want to move on to action stepping. I want to soak this up.
Yeah.
And so we actually got a cocktail and talked about our visualization. We went and got dinner and just talked about our visualization for hours. We just asked more details. What does your studio look like? What does this look like? What was the color of the thing that you had here? Or what was the lobby like in the building you came in? Tell me about you had a driver. Could it be Lyft, or does it have to be like somebody or like all of these different things? And we just like really soaked that up. And I think there was a lot of really fun, energetic power in that, in terms of just like building on the vision and making it stronger and stronger and stronger before we went in and started the action planning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would 1000% encourage anyone that does this to do exactly that, because there is so much, I think, togetherness in dreaming together, and also just like our interpretation. Like when I read my visualization to you the first time, there's certain things that, we got to write fast. Right? So there's certain things we couldn't actually go
You have to
deeper
like
on.
fill in.
Yeah. So in my head, I might have written, like on paper, I might have written one sentence that described, how I imagined a meeting going. But in my head, I knew exactly where that meeting was at, who it was with, the time of day
Yeah.
it was, how I got there. Like all that was in my head.
So we gotta talk about
it allows us to
that.
fill all of those,
Yeah.
gaps in for one another. And then, just sit in it and just
Yeah,
like,
just enjoy it.
I think enjoy it, yes, but feel it, because when you sit in it and you allow yourself to really feel it, then this dream starts to become like a heavy, like tangible thing.
Yeah, real.
That feels real. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. So then when you go to do the action steps the next day, you're way more connected to it. And I think that's also one of the things that we said with 2024, that realness, that desire, that deep, heavy in a good way feeling is what made us get here and what made us say it's okay, the how doesn't matter, possibility is alive.
Yeah.
Let's create that. So I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
So then the next morning, what we started with is when you look at your visualization, we were able to kind of divide it into buckets. And buckets
Yeah.
were like our finances, our home, our career, our physical bodies, our lifestyle, our relationship. And we then scored each bucket just on like how close do we think we are right now to that life. And I thought that that was really fun and really eye-opening because, again, it made us really proud of a lot of things. But then it neutrally also helped us say, okay, so where and how do we want to kind of focus to bring that life even closer to us?
Right. I thought that was a great exercise too. Which this was the first time we did it like that, right?
Yeah, I don't think we've done that before.
I really, really liked it. And I think like when I look back at how we did that and broke that up, now see like recognizing the things that we are closer closer to the dream, like what's working, I guess, in the simplest terms.
Yeah.
The what's working then starts to feel like, okay, I can put this is like in my tool belt now of things that like we're doing extremely well. These are the things we're going to continue to do. And then the things like you just did a whole podcast episode on this, but the idea of the one thing to start getting action steps towards the dream life we want to create. Now that I know what's working, I can figure out, or together we were able to figure out just the one thing that's going to unlock the next level of life.
Yeah. And I think we also kind of accidentally discovered that for last year because we didn't have a one thing focus, but
No.
we realized that our relationship last year was the one thing that propelled everything else.
Yeah.
Or I guess technically
Yeah.
still this
And
year,
then, and now that I think about it, like the one thing was like getting to New York in terms of like the goal, but
the
like
target.
yeah, the target. But you're 100% right. Was the one thing that enabled that was our growth
Yeah.
in our relationship, which still so proud and
Yeah.
it feels amazing.
Yeah, and I think when we did this ranking and we were able to like talk about these different buckets, I think we were both just like you said, we're just so proud of how well we've come together, what our communication is like now, how like honest and true and just how good and settled and perfect everything feels, and it felt really good to acknowledge that and honor that and like score that in our bucket and
Yeah.
be aware that that was so helpful. So then what we did is we chose like, okay, if we are looking at these buckets and no matter what we scored them, where could our focus go that would make every other bucket easier to increase the number and or just generally make it become a 10? Like where can our focus go now to make everything else a 10 out of 10? And we found for ourselves that our career bucket and our lifestyle bucket would affect the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was largely what we decided to then focus on in our goal setting because we have goals for all of these buckets, but like the biggest goals that we want to focus on the most are really our career, which creates our lifestyle. Like we are recording this on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
this is our career is a big part of our lifestyle right now.
I think one thing to maybe elaborate on for anyone who is listening and maybe isn't quite grasping this concept of the one thing. What Kayla just described was career and lifestyle are the two things that are the one thing, but like the two things that we decided, hey, if we just focus on these, everything else will fall into place. An example of how we maybe would have done this before was we would have maybe had a finance target, for example.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Right? Like if you look at our dream life of the vision we just created, of course that's
It costs
gonna
more.
cost money. It costs more money to live what we had mapped out. But is focusing on making more money the answer to getting there? And what we in this ranking and scoring system, the answer was no.
Yeah.
What's gonna make the finances will just come if we just focus on creating the career. And when I say create career, I mean like I'm as an artist, I'm focused on being the best artist I can be. You as a coach, you're being the best coach and educator that you can be. And it's focused on bringing value to the world through our work versus trying to hit some financial target.
Yeah. And I think for us, that's really important because that was one of the things that I think made my entrepreneurial journey difficult is there's so much about financial targets and I'm not money motivated.
Yeah.
Like at all.
I think neither one
And
of us.
neither of us are. Like we don't like I've tried to set goals and like the only time we are money motivated is when we have something we want to spend money on, like buying a house. Okay, we are motivated to save money for a house, right? So
Yep.
I think for us, our motivation needs to be somewhere else. And like you said, your motivation is being able to be creative, being able to make music, being able to create something that other people enjoy and create vibes and inspiration for them. And mine is very much helping more people in the world literally live better lives. And I can do that by coaching more coaches. And so the more coaches that I coach, ultimately that will then, it will result in more money coming to our lives, which will
Yep.
then it result in our finance bucket and our home bucket and all of these other buckets like
Yeah.
increasing.
Yep.
But it wouldn't have, we would not be moving very far in the next year if we chose a number goal.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So the takeaway for that is focus on finding the one thing in your buckets and don't spread yourself thin. Like if I just read these buckets, for example, and these buckets are all based on what's important to us and what was in our visualization,
in
but
the
like
visualization.
finances, career, house, body, right? Like working out and health goals, lifestyle assistance from like house cleaners to chefs, whatever, relationship. Like these are all different buckets that we scored against. And what I would encourage is focus on the one that's going to enable growth in all of them versus
Yeah.
trying to hit all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's really beneficial. So that was step 3. Step 4 and 5 kind of go together. Step 4 is once you pick that bucket, then deepen the visualization in that. And based on like the work that we had done the night previously, we kind of had already had that, but you're on a new day, a new morning. We'd already reread our visualization before we even did the bucketing and the scoring. But deepen the visualization. So we went back and looked at our careers individually and just kind of journaled a thing of like, what is my future self like in my career? How is she working? What is her day like? What does she feel? Who's she supported by? Who's she talking to? What is she planning?
Yeah.
Like all of those types of things. And you did the same thing as we went to then go plan that. You need to re-visualize that because that's what then helps you create your action steps very specifically for your goal of your future self in your career. So share, I guess, how you did that.
Yeah.
I think you do that like yours is so clear and great and understandable.
Yeah, so this is fun that I get to share this with everybody because now everyone can kind of hear like what it is I'm chasing this year and trying to create, or I guess but as far as my goals, when we talk about career and lifestyle, those were the two main buckets. What I realized was in order for me to be the version of myself that I saw in that visualization, there were certain things, both career and lifestyle, that I knew were happening. For example, audience size was bigger. The amount of streams for my music is higher. The collaborations that I'm doing are with collaborators that are like dream collaborations. The clients that I'm doing creative direction for are like dream projects. Ellie's back. The brand partnerships that I'm, getting are, if you guys are watching, the cat's going crazy. But like the brand partnerships that I'm creating for myself are, everything's like firing on all of those cylinders, but it's like, okay, how do you get there? And the number one thing when we talk about career is really for me, it's the audience growth. It's the focus on really bringing value to my audience and finding my audience and just focusing on that and not worrying too much about. It'd be great to have 6 million followers, yes, but I don't need 6 million followers that are just kind of spread across, every which way. I would much rather have 50,000 really dedicated people who are so invested in just my brand.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I started to realize was like, okay, there is, in order for me to like start really growing audience, there's these two factors that I'm going to focus on this upcoming year. One of those is identifying and really broadening my network. I think since we've been in New York, I haven't fully done this because we've been in such a transition, but broadening my network so I can find myself in the spaces with other collaborators, other brands, other artists that are in the niches of those audiences that I'm trying to find, and that I also want to find me.
Yeah.
And one example that I threw out was like, hey, I don't necessarily need to be in Vogue. Would it be cool? Sure, of course. But there are other platforms, like if you're familiar with Outlander. Outlander is a magazine that anyone who is in fashion or a creative likely follows them because they have a very great grasp on what's culturally working, what's hot, all of that stuff.
And I think I just want to point out that visualization came from, or that information came from the visualization that we did right before this, where it was like, so where are you? Like, what are you getting published in? What are you this? And you're like, oh, well, yeah, like Outlander, because that's
Exactly.
where the people are.
Exactly.
And that's what gave us a lot of these realizations.
And that realization for me was just like, wow, why have I not this whole time been thinking about, I should really just I should put all my efforts towards finding, okay, well, who works with them and who's in that circle and how do I get them to see my art?
Yeah.
You know, how do I create so that those are the publications that see the work?
Yes.
And then once that publication sees the work and the work is shared, now the audience that I
Audience
actually
finds
care
you.
about finds me
Yeah.
versus me trying to have any
Have a viral post. Or
have
like,
a viral
yeah.
post or have like like taking any magazine. Like it won't work if the wrong,
If you get in Better
media
Homes and
outlet
Gardens.
is
Just kidding.
yeah, but yeah, but if it's getting shared to people who don't care, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So a big part of my exposure and growth tactic is going to be networking and finding the right people. And really, it's the whole degrees of separation. I have such a network that I just need to really tap in, and I'm excited for what that can create from an audience growth standpoint.
Well, and what I think is what's really cool is the backwards planning and the way that you really did that, because you kind of described it a little bit different than how we did it that day and found it, because we made the visualization. In the visualization, we clarified that it'd be like a magazine like Outlander, a publication like that. And then we're like, okay, well, how do you get an Outlander? Because you don't get an Outlander just for having 50,000 followers, right? You don't, because there's a ton of people with that and they're not invited to Outlanders. How do you get that? Well, people who work at Outlander have to be talking about you. They have to be seeing you. Well, how do you get somebody at Outlander to talk about you? Well, you meet them or you meet somebody who's around them, right? And so then we're able to be like, okay, so then what I need to do is figure out how do I get myself around the people who know Outlander editors or photographers or different things like that. And so that's where that networking piece comes in. You're like, okay, so now my job is to do informationals every single week. This is an active thing that I know will pull me all the way to that result of being with my network and talking to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I think that's so clear and so awesome.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's just like it's being a tastemaker supported by the tastemakers, right? And that's it's that simple.
But
So
you have
that
to be around the tastemakers to make it happen.
exactly. So the exposure part that's one approach, and then the other is just really focusing on my artistry. I think in the simplest, like to make this next part as clear and simple as possible, having some really clear boundaries that unlock my ability to stay creative, to create, like to literally create. I have not always been so great at that. And if you have been following our journey since leaving Nike, like one big epiphany that I had was I was able to map across a whole a year and break down how much time I was actually spending devoted to my art. It was 4%.
Yeah, we
And
found
so,
that in our 2024 goal setting.
and so that
Yeah.
was like one thing that really propelled me to do something about it and make the move, quit the job, go kind of dream scenario and start being an artist more full time. Well, it might look like I am doing that more full time now, which to a degree I am, but I would argue that's really only at like 20%.
Yeah, we redid the math
And
and we're like, okay, so you've gone up from 4%, but you are
well,
not
yeah,
at like large percent.
because what I don't do well is I don't dedicate literal days or time devoted to just allowing myself to stay in the flow state.
Yeah.
And consecutive days at that, like I end up, whether I'm working on your business, working on my client work, then trying to do some admin related shit for my own stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, I gotta do content and I have to, this, that, and third.
Yeah, you were kind of dabbling in all the things
next
all the
thing you
beginning of
know,
the day, and then you're like,
yeah, next thing you know, like
not.
the day that I like said, hey, I'm gonna make music today, ended up being 50 other things that I did that day, and I only did music for, and nowhere near the time to get in the flow state and create. So, anyways, I have been really poor at creating those boundaries for myself, and making a schedule that actually works for me. Now that we've been here in New York, I know, I think together we have kind of learned what can enable or unlock that for us. And so we created a schedule. So I'm really excited about this because now this is going to allow me to show up consistently, as the artist that I want to be. I think that the possibilities now are going to go so much further because there's true dedicated time. And in a nutshell, y'all, I'm basically spending half the week devoted to the art, and that's it. Like nothing else is penetrating those days. Not even my wife.
I know. Well,
You're not-
this is what I think. This is actually a really important thing to point out is when you make a goal, it's so important that your stakeholders know. So even if you could go through this process on your own, but make sure you tell your partner or the other people in your life about what you're doing, because it's really hard to hold boundaries when nobody else knows about them.
Yes.
And even when I know about John's boundaries, I still want his time. I'll be like, do you want to hang out with me today instead? And it's like, I need to be aware, and we need, and I think because this is one thing we did really, really well in 2024 was saying, okay, yes, but remember we both talked about it, and I know you want to see me right now, but can we actually wait until dinner or something like
Yeah.
that and hold those boundaries and be
Yeah.
like, okay, yes, I care about where you're going, and I love you, and I will have attention later. I love to have attention from John.
But that's the point, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's supporting each other's. You have helped me create this boundary, and now you're going to help me keep it.
Yes.
And that is something that I think is going to enable me to be able to grow as an artist and be consistent. Like how many of us, whether you run a business or you're a creative, one of the hardest things is just staying consistent in, especially if you're in the content game. Consistency is it's really hard. It takes devotion.
Yeah.
And you can't really be consistent if you don't create the time. So I've always been someone who has preached, none of us have time, you have to make the time.
Yep.
And yes, I have made the time before, but it has not been anywhere near the amount of time that is needed to get where I'm trying to go. And I'm finally creating a schedule that's going to do that.
Yeah, I'm
so
excited about it.
very excited about that. So in a nutshell, as you all heard, audience growth is a big focus, and then growth as an artist and my consistency is a big focus. And yeah, so those are like the two big things. And if you think about again, career and lifestyle, those were like
They
the
fit into
pillars.
it, yeah.
This fits into that because now
Yeah.
lifestyle will be dictated by a lot of the networking and the things that show up to.
Well, yeah, those are your
And-
action steps, right? The informationals, the networking, and then holding boundaries.
And
for your
holding the
time.
boundaries,
Yeah,
yep.
and those are both your career
Yeah.
and lifestyle.
And there's a couple other things, but in a nutshell, like that's
Main
it.
focus.
Yeah.
And I think I like that we're saying that's it. Because I'm also the type of person who's like, give me a list of 100 things and I'm going to start ticking them off. But this is also on kind of like the one thing book is when you focus on these things for an extended period of time, the other things are going to come to fruition. And they are going to benefit everything. And that doesn't mean these are going to be the only things we're doing. Of course, we're going to check on our goals as the year goes and like edit and adjust as needed. But I think for you, largely those things are going to be big things to hold through the entire year, where I think some of my stuff is going to change, but as part of like the plan.
Yeah.
But I think those two things are going to hold you like all year.
They
Actions to do.
100% is. I mean, I have literally as part of this is where I was like, I didn't share everything, but like part of the whole like growth part with the networking is like I need to be meeting someone once a week. That's what we talked about, and there's 52 weeks in a year.
Yep.
So I got to meet 50 new people that are a degree of separation from the space I want to be in.
Yeah.
Just literally off the strength of like
Woo.
that's a whole year worth of
Yep.
meetings.
Yeah. It's going to be awesome.
But yeah, it's gonna be awesome. All right, so let's transition to yours.
So then for me, and in full transparency, like I struggled a little bit with this year. And it's funny because I'm not the person who struggles with my action steps. And I think part of that was, I just made a post about this on Instagram, but part of that was I think my goals are bigger than they've been before. And because like you said, we're starting to believe so big, and this 2024 gave us so much evidence that we can believe big and we can make it happen. And
Yeah.
I normally am someone who sets a goal that feels big but safe, very likely. I'm totally going to achieve it type of person. And this year I was setting goals that felt really big and a little bit scary. And I think I don't know, ran head first into some imposter syndrome that we had to like really pull apart. And so we actually started doing a little bit of my goal setting. It was last minute. We had a dinner reservation. So I was like, you know what, we can't do this right now. So then we went and started over for me the very next morning. And even then we had to I didn't feel fully settled. So we had to, and when I say we had to, John was advocating for me and being like, you don't feel fully settled. We are going to review your goals again. So then we took a whole other day, a whole other afternoon to go to a Soho house and sit by a Christmas tree. It was great. And a fireplace. It was awesome. And go through my goals until I felt comfortable, because back to like what John was saying about this trip, this is a goal setting trip. We need to leave being ready for 2025 and taking action for 2025. And if we wouldn't have spent that other day, I don't know that
Yeah.
I would have felt that way.
You wouldn't have.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have. But I wanna like commend you for also just being honest. I think it's really easy to have spent like we literally spent 48 hours already on this work.
Yeah.
It's very involved. You didn't allow yourself to just say, oh, you know what, like it'll be fine. I think a lot of people do that.
Well, and that's like something I've been practicing not doing. I'm very much it'll be fine, it's good enough. And that's something I've been getting over in the last year too.
Yeah,
I've really been practicing being like, this isn't good enough. I want to make it better.
Yeah. And in fact, good enough is just those two words just aren't really allowed here. Like
Good enough is not making my 2025 dreams come true.
No, good enough is not good
Not
enough.
it. It's just not it. Yeah. So my vision when we revisualized my career and we kind of went back to it was really that it might be like we didn't put a timeline on any of this. Right. So my vision is so big that it's like, I'm shooting for it this year. And of course I would love if it happened this year.
Yeah, the cats are tripping.
But I'm shooting for it this year, and I would love if it happened for this year, but I'm totally okay if it takes 2-3 years to get there. And I think maybe that was part of why I was like, I don't know how to set action steps for this. And really it is when I just started Coaches College halfway through 2024. And in my vision, Coaches College is like super running so well, and we were refining it and making it better. And it was this thing that's become global, and we have different pieces that are, stylized for specific types of coaches in different industries and different things like that. And it's become this big program where I have a team that helps me run things, just like a lean and mean team and things like that. And so in my vision, I spend a lot of my time not necessarily building and running Coaches College, but it's already there. And obviously I'm in a point where I'm building it.
Yep.
But I spend my time going to conferences and being asked to speak at them and being asked to speak on a lot of podcasts. My book is a New York Times bestseller. So there's a lot of things like that are really, really big. And I'm obviously not doing all of those things and writing a book this year. And so the book, we were like, that can be a focus for next year. But because it was so big, I ran into a little bit of imposter syndrome. And I'm like, okay, well, what are the things that I need to happen for all of that to happen? And I think exposure has to happen, success has to happen. One of the things that was in my vision that's really important to me is I want to be able to have time to either sit on boards or panels or be involved with or create programs that benefit and give back, most likely nonprofit programs, to causes that I believe in. And in order for someone to invite me to be on their board, I have to prove myself. I have to earn that invitation.
Yep.
And so we kind of talked about what are all the things that I need to be doing to be in that seat. And so some of the things logistically, like when we looked at that, some of the goals that I have is, getting the lead generation for Coaches College, creating a system so that it can start, like starting now as I'm building it, make it so that a lot of the pieces of it can be independent when it comes. One of the other goals I have right now is like, okay, whatever team I plan on hiring, I need to be that person now, because Coaches College isn't big enough that I need more team, but I need to be those people now so when the time comes, I know exactly how to hire them. I know exactly the job description. I know exactly what they would do. I know exactly how much time it takes. I know
Yep.
all of the steps. So it's like I have to be those things right now. So that's another thing that we kind of did. And similar to John, how he looked at his schedule very specific, we made my schedule specific where I'm like, this is the day that you are being the coach and what will eventually be like a success coach, right? This is the day that you are being the chief marketing officer, right? This is the day that you are being the CEO. This is the day that you are doing this, so that I could start to look at and kind of view those things in that way. So when we think about that, yes, I need my systems. Yes, I need to be my team. But I also want to be showing how I am an authority and placing myself in the world and using social media to do so, because I already am, as somebody who's leading by example. And one thing that I realized is as I've transitioned my business into Coaches College, I haven't taken that role of thought leader as much on Instagram. I've talked a lot about my life. I've talked about learning things in my life. But in terms of coaching, I haven't shown the world how intelligent I am at coaching. Like the world has right now no idea I have 3 degrees on the subject, on multiple certifications, right? And it's like nobody but the people inside Coaches College know the expertise that I have, and I need to start sharing that. So for me, largely my goals are around what are my actions in creating a system for client acquisition to grow Coaches College, and then also what are my actions to be seen as a thought leader based on the social media or the information that I'm putting out and how I am online.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm really excited for that, because I think there's one of my favorite examples or ahas that we had was the conversation that we were having at dinner when B was like, I didn't realize, like, wow, how smart Kayla is. It like blew his mind. And I was just like,
I'm like, we've been friends for a decade.
yeah, I was like, I was like, oh, it's because we're literally not showcasing it intentionally and forwardly all the time.
Well, it's because, also I think I think this is an important thing for me too that I realized is it's the environments that I'm in, right? So since we have gotten together, my environment has changed a lot. And since I left teaching, it's absolutely changed. The people that I am around are people who have other interests that I'm into, like wine tasting, but when we're going wine tasting or out to dinner where nobody else wants to have a conversation about autonomy-based coaching strategies, right?
Yeah.
Or how people learn, or what's the best way to set up a lesson so that your learner is going to have the highest amount of understanding and the most ability to apply later, right? Like that's just not...
Sounds like a great wine tasting topic.
But in our world, that wasn't something that I was really able to talk about. And even kind of the thing that you said is for us, even in our conversations, it wasn't a big one because you weren't very as like growth mindseted until more recently. And so being in an environment where I can showcase that not only makes me more confident, but it also helps other people see that. And that was one of the things that I practiced in 2024 was talking about what I wanted, even though no one else around me was. And that's how he was able to say like, oh my God, because I was talking about what I wanted. And he's like, look at her brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So that's a big goal too, is, you know, I wrote on my goals on my list, it literally says find the table, because I want to go to the place to sit, to talk with the people who want to talk and dive into the things that I want to as well. And be
Yes.
seen and also grow from doing that.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing that I think is so cool is naturally we have a very similar set of goals. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it's
Like when
literally
it
like
comes
the
to just
exposure
like
and
the exposure part of it, yeah. And I think helping each other get there. In my vision, I literally wrote that you were getting ready for a keynote speaking opportunity. You were being brought in to contribute to something, and I'm really jazzed about what this is going to mean for your brand, and really, I mean, the business of course is going to come with it, but to our point earlier, it's like it's not about the financial part of it as much as it's about sharing your value with as many people as possible.
yeah, yes. And that's what's going to bring. And I do think I do have that big goal of having 500 coaches in Coaches College, because I do know that when that value happens, that does come back financially. And then that's when I can do those other big things that I spoke about, like create a nonprofit or donate it to one that already exists that I can help and influence and change people's lives in so many different ways. And I think
Yeah.
that'll be really powerful.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was step 5, creating your action steps and kind of backwards planning from your specific vision of the bucket that you chose. And then the last step, I think, is really, really fun.
Yeah.
And I know you're super amped because if you're watching right now, we are in what used to be my office, but is now John's studio. And I think the last step is find how you can create your future right now. And that used to like bubble my brain because people in the manifestation woo woo world are always like, be future you right now. And I'm like, how? I'm trying. I see her, but she is on panels and I'm not on a panel, right? So,
Yeah.
or not on a panel, but on the board of a nonprofit or whatever. But when we had our vision and we were talking about it, one of the action steps that we talked about was our physical space. And part of our vision, and I think you already mentioned it, was being in a bigger, different home, right?
Yep.
We are like, oh, we are in Manhattan proper. We have at least 3 bedrooms, that so that you have a studio, I have an office, right? And then our bed has a bedroom.
Yeah.
And we don't have 3 bedrooms right now, but we kind of had this idea. We're like, wait, we can actually make that vision closer to our reality right now. Because one of the things you said very specifically is you're like, my studio has 4 walls, because John's been in the den. So the den is like 3 walls and an opening. And then one part of my vision was when I go to record my podcast, my sessions for Coaches College and all that, I don't do it in my home office. I do it somewhere like in a classroom that can stay set up with like my whiteboard and things like that. And we realized that we could do some rearranging of our current apartment to make those things true for both of us.
Yeah. Which we started to do, and it feels so good.
It feels so good.
Feels so good.
Yeah.
But it also was the visualization just unlocked new ways of thinking, right? The how. The how, like we've been here 6 months now, and like didn't think, at least I didn't think for once that den could be a literal recording studio for
nope.
visual
Didn't cross my mind.
for your work, right? It didn't cross your mind either. And I think that's like, it's just like such an aha when you allow yourself to just see all the possibilities of what you actually have at your fingertips today that could start inching you towards that dream scenario. Now there will be a day where we have the apartment with the 3 beds and a studio set up and a library and all of those things, right? But we just created a space right now that is so much closer to that than it was even
Yeah.
before London.
And I think the reason why that's so fun and that's so powerful is, like I just said, it used to bubble my brain about when I would think, how do I be her now? Because she feels far away. But when you can do those things, she feels like, oh, She's literally not far away. She's here now.
Yeah.
Like the woman who gets invited to be on the board of a nonprofit is literally right here.
Yeah.
Here she is.
She is right here.
Someone could call me up tomorrow. Email me.
Yes, exactly.
And so I think that's really powerful. And that was one thing that we learned last year too,
Mm-hmm.
is how actually easy it is to start bringing your future. And it's what does like, I truly think it's what helped us get to New York so fast last year.
It is. It is 100% why. I think that for anybody listening, like I just feel like we tend to make things that are, especially if it feels like a big or lofty goal, we tend to feel like until we're like there and have it, you can't live it, right? And we did some like, even to move here, there were just like little things like being so intentional about certain purchases. I love the house shoe example.
Yeah, I think
We
that's
always
a
talk
great
about the house shoe example. I had just to give you the short version, but in our visualization last year, I talked about like leaving the company and working from home because I was an artist. And as part of that, I love, if you know me, you know I love to get dressed up. I love fashion. My outfits really are part of my brand and part of my personality and how I express myself. And so one thing that I wanted to feel working from home was still fly. I wanted to like wake up and put on an outfit, but I didn't want to walk around in socks. I also didn't want to walk around in like the cheap house shoes that, you know, maybe you got from the relative that always gives everybody house shoes every year for Christmas. And they're like, you know, $18. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. To me, though, what I wanted was that feeling of like when you put on
together,
an outfit and you put on shoes that you love or loafers that you love or that new shoe feeling, right? There is a feeling of confidence that I get when I have a head to toe outfit that just makes me feel good. And so in my visualization, I was like, I have these specific house shoes that are these gorgeously crafted Japanese brand that I had multiple pairs that, you know, I could style. And so that's a small detail, but it was just like in my mind, it was part of the visualization. And Caleb literally the next month bought me 2 pairs for my birthday. And, you know, it very quickly put me in the mindset of like, oh, the version of me in the future who works from home, who is a full-time artist, who gets dressed up and still looks fly, though they're working at home, they're starting to take shape today.
Yeah.
And that's the smallest example, but boy, did
But it's
that
so
change
so
so
powerful.
much for us.
And you still wear them.
Of course I still wear. That was
'Cause
the
they're
whole
still part of the
goal.
vision.
They're
Yeah.
part of the vision. I just
Yeah.
made it happen sooner. You helped me make it happen sooner.
Yeah.
But I love sharing that example because I think a lot of people think it has to be some big grand thing.
Yeah, it has to be
you
a
know?
new apartment in
It has to
Manhattan.
be a
No,
3-bedroom apartment in
yeah.
Manhattan. No, it could literally be the house shoes
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
inch you towards that
Yeah.
direction, towards that vision.
I think that's so powerful. Another thing
super
that
powerful.
we started doing too before we moved here is like in both of our visions, we like had lunch meetings or meetings outside of the house. And for me, working from home and being alone has been really, really hard for the last 5 years because I love people. I love to touch, talk, interact with people as
Yeah.
much as possible. And so one of the things we started doing was on your work from home day, even when you're still at Nike, going to a coffee shop together to work. And that's one of the things that we have kept
Yeah,
up
we
here
did.
because that's part of our visualization
We
too.
did start to do that, yeah.
So even though right now I'm not taking in my vision, I had a lunch meeting that I took with somebody about planning a program for, you know, the things that I care about. And it's like, even though I'm not doing that now, I can still go somewhere and sit with John and work. And that's like me having that lunch meeting
Yep.
and getting dressed up to go do that and wearing that outfit that I envisioned. And that is a way that I'm bringing it now
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
And yeah, it brings a different power. So
It does.
I think those things are really smart. And that's why I think there's just the power in the visualization that's like, in your words, unmatched.
Unmatched.
He would-
But yeah,
unmatched.
but like now that we have like this studio, right? For example, moving it from the den is like I love the setup over there. We made it work.
It was beautiful.
We made it work. That I think that's the key phrase is like we were making it work. And there's certainly nothing wrong with making things work. But if you have in your power to just think a little outside the box to do more than make it work and actually have it be now, because now I walk in here, I feel so much more inspired. I have natural light, which
Yeah,
is,
the den didn't
and the
have a
den doesn't
window,
have,
which we,
yeah,
which the thing about making that work was for sound.
it's fine.
But
Yeah, yeah, it was fine. But like now working in here, walking in here, I feel like the future version of myself that had a space like this.
yeah,
You know, it
so good.
feels really not real. It's powerful, and now I think some of the best music will not. I think for sure some of the best music will be made in here. But you know, we're transforming into the future version of ourselves
As
by
we speak.
as we speak today.
Yeah, because of this process.
Yeah,
So that's why we want to share it with you because it's been so good to us
yeah,
and it's going to continue to be good to us. So in review, reflect on last year, visualize the shit out of next year, soak up that visualization, rank yourself. Where are you now compared to the visualization that you saw? Pick your areas of focus, visualize those ones even deeper, backwards plan your action steps, and then start taking action now on even the small things.
yes,
Yeah, we're so excited for all of y'all. And please keep us up to date. Like, as you listen to this, as you set your goals, email us, DM us, let us know what your goals are, how you're getting after them, and what you've accomplished. I think that's one of the things that in the last year we've gotten so many messages from
oh,
people who
so
have
many, yeah,
started businesses, changed jobs, moved homes, and have said that we were the inspiration for it. And I think there's not much more that sets my heart on fire than that. So please keep us in the know.
Same.
Yeah.
It's super powerful, and it's a lead by example, I suppose. But it feels really good to get those kind of messages. So, thanks for having me on, so we can talk about how we're creating our dream life.
Yeah, of course. Everybody else, go get yours.